Welcome back to Star Quality, everybody. I'm your host, Stevie. I am not alone today. I'm getting my back gently rubbed. I'm not alone. I have my friend Kalli here. She is visiting me in Cali. And yeah, she's my, I guess, I don't know if you'd want to identify as a co-host, but you're going to be possibly on mic if you'd like. But I thought it'd be fun to have my friend here because she's in town and visiting. And I don't get often the chance to have someone sit in when I'm recording who's not an astrologer. And because Callie's one of my best friends, we chat all the time. We're always talking about astrology. You love astrology.
I do.
But it's great having friends who don't know astrology 100% because you ask great questions, and then that helps me clarify my astrology explanation. So if you want to say hi, you can say hi.
Hi, guys.
So Callie's here. She'll pop in when she wants to. But I am going to give you your Leo full moon forecast for today. And normally there is paywalls for the Lunation episodes, but this is going to be free for everybody because it's a different episode format, and I'm curious to see what Callie's questions are because I think that will probably be, I'm guessing, similar to maybe questions you have listening when you're at home. So this kind of came up when we drove to the spa yesterday and we were listening to Dr. Michael Lennox's Unconscious, what's the podcast called? Conscious Embodiment. I was going to say unconscious embodiment. That's, anyway, conscious embodiment. And Dr. Michael has again, it's not a co-host. It's almost like a producer or something. That's like Zoe. And I do like that Zoe asks questions that the audience would be asking. We were driving, listening to that in the car on the way to the spa, which was glorious and very Leo full moon. And so that's also sort of what stemmed. So it's a bit of an homage reference to, speaking of references, inside joke for me and Callie earlier, but bit of a reference since that came up yesterday. I was like, oh, that'd be fun to do while Callie is here visiting me. Okay. That is context for you to have. So yeah, we're going to get into the full moon. If you would still like to be a supporter of this publication, newsletter, and podcast, you can sign up for the paid tier called the third space. And for the same price as buying me an iced coffee every month, you get all the weekly horoscopes that are paywalled, any of the other paywall content. And there's tons of free stuff too. So, don't be discouraged. I'll always have free things, but I really appreciate the support because it is user supported. And yeah, I think anything else I should promote, Kelly? Okay, I'll take that. Is it a yes? A no? No, I think
Join the third space.
Here, how about a testimony? Callie is a third space supporter.
It's an amazing space. You get the full package, not just the teasers, which always excite me. And I'm always like, ooh, what's she going to cover? And whenever I see like the third space starting, I'm like, I'm in. So do it. It's definitely worth a very affordable cup of coffee price.
Wow, that was an organic testimonial. That was so sweet. Thank you, Callie. And yeah. So yeah, you heard it here first. So so feel free to upgrade your subscription. Like, there's also 7-day free trials if you want to see what's it's all about. But okay, let's get into this this Leo full moon. And okay, well, this week, we're at the end of Aquarius season. Next week we'll go into Pisces season, and Aquarius is co-ruled by Saturn and Uranus. And so Saturn is the planet that brings in discipline and structure and the things that we're looking to build in life. And then Uranus, I've mentioned before, can be known as the kingmaker or the king toppler. It really is just change for change, not even for change's sakes. It's just change. It means things should be done in a different angle. If you're like doing everything really straightforward, it's like turn it on its side. It's asking for something to be considered and done in a way that's just not cookie cutter or not like just how you would expect it to go. I always talk about Charlie XCX, but like I feel like her remix album was like so Uranian in that it's like, why wouldn't I work with the material I already have and then make it totally something new versus this idea that you have to even make something new from scratch. Like that, I felt like that was really like clever Uranian work right there. So Uranus has been a really loud planet this whole week because we've just had squares, which I feel like I'm going to over-explain because I have Kalli here with me, but maybe I should be over-explaining. The squares are tension. Squares are asked for action. And so we've had this before this full moon that's happening. I'll get to the date actually. That's happening February 12th, 2025 at 5:53 a.m. Pacific time. Adjust for your time zone. I'm going to put the image of the chart that is for Los Angeles time, but don't worry about the rising sign, even though it is interesting to see your own cities rising and what that means. But there you go. But this week, building up to the full moon, we've had Mercury meet its exact square with Uranus. Then the sun meet its exact square with Uranus. And now this sun and moon in this opposition, which is a full moon, is also both the sun and moon are making a square to Uranus. So like this big T square, when we have two squares meeting the point, which is Uranus, means that Uranus is our like pimple to pop, if that makes sense. Like Uranus is the planet that really needs attention this week. And it's the last week of Aquarius season, which is Uranus's sign. So if we haven't been operating with Uranian values, consider it, because I think it's such an invitation to deviate and to mix things up. And I think especially in a year that has felt and is continuing to feel super unclear and unknown. And I mean, we're still in Mars retrograde, and I'll get to that in a second. But if things have just been feeling not that exciting, Uranus asks, like, well, what about this situation that could change would make it exciting? Kalli raised her hand. So she has a question. So I'm going to bring the mic to her.
I had a question about squares, and especially in what you're saying and how you're describing Uranus, because oftentimes I feel like astrologers describe squares pretty much like you just said, like tension. Mm-hmm. Dr. Michael Lennox, who I'm a huge fan of, will also say they're stepping stones sometimes. And I sometimes have a hard time interpreting if a square can be a positive or a negative thing. And we talked about this a little bit at the spa yesterday, like Uranus being this change maker. I love the king maker or toppler. I've never heard that before. Oh, hi. Like it sounds like an anything can happen kind of moment, but would you gauge this as more, and nothing is ever one or the other, positive or negative. Sometimes things are complex, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on like what the square, how to interpret the square. T square sounds like extra serious to me.
It does. So to clarify, you're asking, are you asking if it's inherently bad or good, or what would be like a log line question? I heard what you said, but I want to like, just so I'm clear in my answer giving.
Is this scary?
Oh, hot number one question of astrology. I mean, if you don't like change, which
I love change. I personally love change, but I know a lot of people don't like change, and sometimes change can happen too much too soon for some people.
Well, I think also, I mean, not to air out your business, you and I are both Tauruses, and Uranus has, I think, made us like change more than we ever did.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about Uranus and Taurus getting squared, so getting pushed by these planets to use him, to be like, hey, actually Uranus has a word with you. Because let's just talk about a trine, for example. Like you always hear trines are good. It's just because there's flow. Like they're not having conflict. They agree with each other if we personify the planets. Like I'm going to look for a trine in this chart. And we'll talk about all the different aspects going on in this full moon chart. But the moon, the Leo full moon, is trining Chiron. So the moon and Chiron being our wounded healer, the asteroid of, where we can access our pain, but also access our healing. They have a clear line of communication. So when I see a trine, actually Chiron's a great example. So Chiron's trining the moon, like the moon being our more spiritual, internal feeling place, that's like really ripe for like, let it flow, right? Let those feelings of where you've been hurt before, they don't have to be a secret, right? Especially because it's fire. It's like, this is just part of me and there's nothing to judge about it. Now, Chiron is squaring Mars retrograde in Cancer. Now, Mars is retrograde, so that does add a different flavor, but it just might, when I see like a square to Chiron and Mars, I mean, well, I mean, you might, I'm like, no one's going to like what I'm like. This could be family just because Cancer's there, or someone that hurt you like on a, like maybe in the feminine realm of life or family, because this just feels like an overdue conflict, because Mars is our warrior planet. It's making a square to that healer. The moon wants to let it out, Chiron, but the conflict, it's like conflict averse about that letting it out. So like a square shows like, you know, that trine is like, wow, wouldn't that be so nice if we could moon with our moon say everything that's hurt us before, but that square is like, yeah, and there could be conflict that comes. I don't know if you've had this. I've had this with my family. Like if I bring up something that hurt me in the past, they're like, well, I was hurt too, you know, and it's like, and that can feel like conflicts coming, but ultimately everyone's trying to get to a place of understanding. And I've had it. I mean, me and my mom are both Cancer Mars, so I've had to have that conversation. I'm like, I would like you to not respond immediately with your feeling, like, you know, like just having that flow. So I think trines and sextiles show where that's what we want, and that's going to feel easy to access. And squares are going to take an extra step. I think that stepping stone is actually an interesting phrase, but it's not like an easy stepping stone. It's like a step you have to build yourself. It's like, oh, there's actually not a path to, there's a huge backyard full of grass and it's wet, and there's a shed that I have to go to record this podcast, and I have to make my own steps to get to the shed all the way in the back. If it was a trine, there'd be a clear path of stepping stones already there. Was that good, or was it?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you also explained, or what I heard was, it's not in isolation either. A square isn't necessarily in isolation. There might be other aspects that are influencing it, and to maybe hyper focus on one would be leaving out part of the story.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a square to Chiron from Mars. Chiron's also getting a trine. Mm-hmm. So it's truly like, I think of charts as like, this is like a full recipe, right? There's not just citrus, you know, there's a secret sweet thing in here as well, where the sweet might be the trine and the citrus bitterness would be the square. And so coming back to the T-square, and it's just a fancy way to say there's two squares happening at once, making a pressure point on Uranus. So the sun that is conjunct Mercury, because we have the sun at 24 degrees Aquarius, Mercury at 26, is squaring Uranus. At the same time, the moon in opposition, because it's always in opposition, is also squaring Uranus. So the conscious and the subconscious, the like waking ego and the like internal feeling space are both pushing on Uranus, saying, I mean, it's just like, what do you need to be happy in both mind, body, spirit, especially mind, because Mercury is there. And so Mercury is connected to our communication. Maybe there's something about our thought process that's just feeling really old, and like, it's just not certain. It's like, oh, wow. I don't know. I'm sure we've talked about, and I'm thinking of like probably gossip we've done for the last few days, and not trying to tie it too directly. But I guess only we would probably know. But of just like, what just feels like such old thought patterns that are like, is this building your community in an Aquarian way? And is this also serving you as the individual? And if it's just not, what very practical, because Uranus is it's before it moves into Gemini later this year, it's still in very practical Taurus. So these are asking for maybe some practical steps. Uranus is also getting, while we're just talking about the aspects of Uranus, it's getting a sextile from the North Node in Pisces and a trine from the South Nodes. And when we think about the nodes, that's just talking about the greater path we're taking and the bullshit from the past that we're leaving behind. So everything feels, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't see this too often in astrology where it's like, oh yeah, hang on to the past. That's always good. Like, that's always a great way to go. But I mean, the Mars in Cancer retrograde probably wants to a little bit, because that's that square to Chiron. You know, there's a nostalgia, or maybe like this promise that things were going to go this way, or like, this is how, you know, I know I talk about this all the time with my contemporaries of my, like, I thought I'd have a kid by now. I thought I'd have a house. I thought I would hit this with my career. And like, you know, Leo moon is a great reminder of like to not compare ourselves, and to, I saw, this wasn't really, I don't think this was related to the Leo full moon, but maybe it was. I don't know. The internet. Sometimes I scroll past things. I'm like, did I see this or did I think this? Which is always scary. But just because it's Valentine's week and there's so much themes of love, like coming back to self-love with Leo, I think is like a really beautiful message. And if someone has like, if this was like written by someone somewhere, please send it to me because I will link it. And I think you should quote your references. But we live in like a blur, like an internet time blur. Like even like the Kendrick Lamar smirking meme, like I've seen that now 9,000 times today to a point where I'm like, okay, I don't even know if there's original thought anymore. Except for Kendrick. Kendrick actually is original thought. So long rant on Uranus coming back to, there is a shift being asked of us. There is a mindset change being asked of us. And also, it's been now we have Venus in Aries and it's going to go retrograde back into Pisces eventually, but we haven't had much fire around lately. And so this Leo moon is also such like a really, I just want to see if there's any other aspects. We talked about the trine to Chiron, the square. Really, that's it. It's like, it's touching back in, and that Chiron being in Aries is also related to that fiery self. There's really just like a, like, I don't know, like it's all I can say is like, remember who you are, because if you keep getting lost also in other people's stories, because Aquarius can represent the collective and community. And I know so far this year has felt like so often, and it makes sense because there's a lot of political confusion and chaos on purpose right now, that like I'm just feeling so many people like, I don't want to repeat this again. I don't want to repeat like how fucking shitty I felt like since 2016, and now it even feels worse. And it also feels like, what's like the word where it's like, oh my God, there's a word for this. It's like where the entire society says something's normal, but it's hyper normalization. Like when there's hyper normalization, like we were just looking at our Google Maps and it says like Gulf of America. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Are you just like fucking kidding me? And so I think that Leo moon is that reminder that like, Leo is connected to drama, and there's like a lot of people that will want to bring you into their drama, but also like, it's also knowing when things are just drama and like it's not real, like it's theater. Like this is literally all, and again, there are real life consequences. I'm not saying like ice raids are theater. It's like, well, it is theater actually, because it is trying to show that this president's doing something to his fan base. Look, I'm already doing these things by what? Arresting literal grandmas and children. Like he's not even promising on the actual things that he said, because it's the theater of looking like this. So sorry to my international listeners. Well, first of all, sorry on behalf of my country, I guess, but also just on behalf of like the drama and theatrics being so center stage right now, when like Leo knows when things are meant to be left on the stage for the performance, and also then coming back to who they are as an individual and not like letting that work soak into their personal identity. So I think too, maybe there's like a little bit of like work self separation that feels very there. Like, I mean, I know there's some actors who I guess stay in character and don't break, but that's not the norm. Like that is not the normal case, in a Daniel Day-Lewis sort of situation. So I think too, that separation of like whose drama is for who, like what it like staying in your own lane is very Leo. And then also coming back to Leo being the sign connected to the sun, solar power and vitality, like what just makes you feel like yourself. I'm going to take a breath because that was a rant on the Leo stuff, and I'll look at the other aspects. But Kalli, did you have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerned about everything I just said there? Okay. You need a sec? All right. Come back to anything. But I'm just
it sounded to me a little bit like the change that could be like almost like the squares. This is how I'm interpreting what you said. Mm-hmm. The squares could be like a pressure to change, but that the change could really lead to things that have needed to change. It's not like disruption just for disruption's sake. Like if there are themes from the past that you are ready to shed, and that's full moons, right? We're releasing things.
Yes.
Like maybe that's like part of a positive, like a snake shedding its skin, like a positive process of letting go and That's really beautiful to me.
And that's an interesting thing I never thought to like maybe express is, to me, as far as I've learned and interpreted astrology, nothing in astrology, like this squares aren't saying it's unnecessary change. I think the only time things can feel like an illusion or false information is retrogrades and sometimes Neptune, because Neptune can cloud information. Like we saw Neptune transits heavily associated with like during I'm like, which election fraud? Like during like the initial 2016 election, like misinformation stuff. Like there was and like election interference, there was like a lot of heavy Neptune energy. So like, yeah, when you see like a square from Uranus, it's not like I'm joking. Like it's like change your hair and like fuck up your stuff because I'm saying change for change's sake. It's like no, something here is like begging for an adjustment, and you keep doing it the same way, which can be trines and sextiles, because that's usually like keep going with that flow. I'm trying to think of like a tarot card that would be like, you have to try this different. Like you must simply give this a shot in a different way. And, you know, I mean, it's a fixed square. Like, you know, anytime we have fixed.
4 of Cups, maybe.
A 4 of Cups. Okay.
He's sitting by the tree.
Oh, yeah. And he's like contemplating.
He's just, like, staring at them.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like, I mean, you maybe you are in a maintaining time. And also this is a general reading. You might be at a point in your life, you're like, I don't have anything I want to change. And that's fine. Like same with any mysticism, like take what works, leave what doesn't. I'd be shocked by that, but you know, because I think everyone has probably something, whether it's connected to romantic relationships, money, home, friendships. There's probably some update that, especially when it's fixed stuff, the stubborn signs are all now hitting the stubborn angle, and eventually someone's got to fold their stubbornism. Well, I did just pause to have a sip of coffee, and it was on a 666 marker, which also is very change and also very connected to Venus being 6 number. So let's look at Venus for a second. But yeah, clarifying the moon aspects are sun, of course, opposite sun, and that sun is tied to Mercury. So our communication planet is really heavy in this, and then hitting that square to Uranus, which is also just, again, can't make it clear, begging for an adjustment. In God, I feel like I wrote something in the weekly forecast for this week when I was like kind of looking ahead, and I think too also like what part we might have in something, because it's Leo moon and very much of this self, like what stories that we've been perpetuating maybe in the group conversation. You know, like I guess in a loving way, it's like it could be you. And I think Uranus might be, you know, maybe it is the people, maybe it's you, and maybe it's like a coming to terms that it's both of you. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to also accept that everyone's at fault sometimes, and like it's not always a clear hero versus villain. And I think that that's offering, if it is in this sort of like conflict sort of way, that there's maybe everyone has a little bit of blame in the situation. Okay, let's look at this cluster over here. So we have a conjunction out of sign. Well, we have the North Node in Pisces next to Neptune in Pisces. It's a wide, I wouldn't even say this is a conjunction, but Saturn is nearby at 18 degrees of Pisces, and then Venus is on the other side of Neptune at 5 degrees of Aries. And, you know, the South Node's always going to be opposite the North Node, so that's not like too shocking of information. You know, they're a magnetized pair, if you will. But this whole Venus, Neptune, it's just Venus and Neptune are getting a sextile from Pluto, which also feels like a kind of confirmation of like either a reset or an investment, because Pluto can be kind of black or white. So like Pluto's either like, yeah, go further and deeper, hardcore, or like cut this shit out. And so when we have the North Node, Neptune, and Venus, and I'm just going to include Saturn in this combo because like when you look at it visually on the chart, you're like, they're together. Saturn is like, what am I building towards? North Node is like, what is my purpose? Neptune, remember we talked about, can be kind of cloudy and maybe some misinformation. Neptune's like, I don't know. I just like want to vibe. And Venus in Aries does have that competitive energy that is going to be connected to the Venus retrograde coming up March 1st. And so we're also right now, consider this a lesson or like a possible preview, right? Of like what something is connected to our purpose, but it's also connected to our joy. And some might argue like purpose should have both, right? Like of making money and enjoying life or whatever it is. But there's something in the structure in a Saturnian way. And then also with that extra help from Pluto, which maybe isn't known for being like a helpful planet, but it is like the clarifying, back to tarot, it is like the clarifying card of this cluster of like whatever it is, you need to be fully in, because Pluto is that death, transformation, rebirth, the lord of the underworld. He's not like lighthearted, like it's a very intense planet, but because of its intensity, and it's still, I would say, relatively newly in Aquarius, there is something here about getting connected with the future you're building, because Aquarius is so future minded as well. But that's also really like literally illuminated with the North Node, and the North Node is newly in Pisces. So maybe it's just this last year and a half, especially with the North Node changes, and then especially with like the Pluto ingress and then dipping back into Capricorn. It is just another how many times can we say this in 2025? But the astrology has been so loud. Like we just aren't in 2024 anymore. Even if some of the stuff feels like we are stuck in last year because of the retrogrades, but maybe take this time to plan ahead, especially as we think about this Leo new moon, full moon coming back to connecting to ourselves. So, yes, that's my like side explanation rant on this Pisces plus Aries cluster with Saturn, North Node, Neptune, and Venus, getting some love from Pluto. And yeah, there's just there's a bit of a like finality there. Like Pisces can be quite endless, but that Aries Venus is like just, there's like the guys who want to do old stuff, and then the person that wants to do a new thing with Venus. And then Pluto in Aquarius just wants to do whatever makes sense for the future and whatever is going to bring you the most power and authority and influence. And so maybe too, if you've been taking a back seat or like hiding yourself, because Neptune can hide things sometimes, maybe you're still figuring out the plan to reemerge later this year, this is a really great time to like plan before we kind of go into like much easier astrology. Not easy, but easier astrology when we get to the spring, because it is going to be pretty, what's a good word for this? I mean, it's just retrograde-y and confusing and a little stuck in the past, but begging for the future is like almost basically until mid-April is that energy, with some, different dashes of flavor in the mix. Okay, I think I have a question from my producer. Let me bring the mic to Kalli.
Well, it reminded me of what we were talking off air about locking in until April, and that sort of reminded me of what you were saying just now.
Mm-hmm. Lock the fuck in where you can. You like, that's actually a nice point. Like, it's locking in, not in like 9 different buckets of life. What is the number one bucket that you got to lock in on? Then where can we nurture bucket 2 just a little bit? And then like bucket 3, when we're ready, we can go from there. Because also Pisces too is like being right with our spirit. And so also if our routine or the way that we're trying to get ahead has just like been feeling like not us, they not like us, like not aligned in our soul, it's like a bit also like a permission to like, you actually don't have to power through. But if you really want to do it, then Pluto's like, then fucking do it. But if you don't want to power through the same shit you've been doing, then what is the new path? And maybe it's not totally different from the current path you're on, because I think Pisces is really good at deviating or like modifying things slightly without like having to like totally start from scratch. Even though the Aries Venus would totally be down to like maybe start something new. Maybe it's taking something from your old stuff like, I'm trying to think. It's like if you're like you've been a chef at a restaurant and your fucking restaurant's like driving you nuts. It's not like quitting the restaurant right now, but maybe it is making that side time to like sell your sauces, at the farmer's market. Maybe you do once a month, see how the sales do, keep building that for the rest of the year. It's like we don't have to fully depart from what's keeping you going, but also don't be, it's like, I don't know. It's like, this is very classic advice, but your workplaces aren't your family. Like anything can happen at any moment. So also be prepared to forge that new path if the path is, because it might just end up coming to you. I think that's all I got on this cluster, but I'll come back if need be. I'm just doing let's talk about Jupiter, because wow, Jupiter is in Gemini, been in Gemini. It is unaspected. So unaspected means no planets are influencing Jupiter. It's standing alone. Kalli, you can see the visual. There's no trines, there's no sextiles, there's no squares, there's no oppositions. And honestly, when people are like, oh my God, a square, I'm scared, or an opposition, I think unaspected is, if we want to deem things scary, is almost the scariest, because it's all you. Mm-hmm. What does Jupiter want to do on its own, isolated from the group? And so Jupiter in Gemini is still that planet of connection, of storytelling, of connecting to the people that make it feel like itself, of writing, of sharing. And so, like, not to say like, oh, I'm not really like worried about Jupiter in this chart. It's just not. It's not giving any message to any other planet, and no other message is getting a message from it. And also, what that could mean when something's unaspected is, because Jupiter's our planet of socialness and fun, Gemini is our sign of friends. That maybe like the outside voices, our friend groups. I mean, I had a friend say this quote long ago, and I quote it all the time. It's just like, it's not living for the friend group. It's not like worrying that much about like what other people are saying about what you're doing, which also makes sense because it's a Leo full moon. Like Leo doesn't care. Like Leo's like, I don't need to, what school are you applying to? I want to go with you. Like, or, like, what day are you doing this? Like, signing up for this workshop. Like, do what's best for you. And maybe there's something you do want to do alone, because Leo's not afraid to do solo activities. Especially when we release from Aquarian energy, which is so group minded, that is like a double confirmation of there might be some things in this next lunation that we do want to do by ourselves versus do with like a fuck ton of other people. That's all I got. I mean, it's unaspected. That's all I got. How did that sound to you, Kalli?
Great. It's funny looking at how clumped some of the planets are, and then Jupiter is just, it's like it's not at the party.
Totally. It's not at the party, even though like it's just a planet that is the party. And again, maybe you might have more fun going to these different things alone and meeting new people. Like it's just doing its own thing.
Does it matter that it's in the 4th house?
No, because that's just for LA.
Oh, gotcha.
So, I mean, it's interesting for us here that, what could that mean in a like social? Maybe that's more house parties for us here in Los Angeles. But no, yeah, it's going to change depending on where the person's located. But good question. But yeah, and it can be fun to look at your city's chart, being like, oh, what is like New York up to, or like what is like the vibe when I'm maybe experiencing a full moon in another country, or I know I talked a little bit about Mars, but let's get back to it because I haven't talked about Saturn's. We talked about Saturn with this cluster of the North Node and Neptune, and technically the Aries Venus, but not really, but you'll see the visual. But Mars, we talked about that square to Chiron, how there could be that kind of like fear of conflict, or maybe there's something with like the family that's like kicking up, because it can be so literal with Cancer, Mars retrograde. But we are getting back to trines. We have a trine from Saturn and Pisces to this Cancer Mars. And fun fact that I was seeing, back to Kendrick Lamar, he's a 17 degrees Cancer Mars and it's retrograde. And I feel like everyone's just like is thriving off of like, no, this person's a bitch, call them a bitch, like call out people that need to be called out. And so Saturn and Mars, the malefics, technically they are the bad boys, and they're bad boys just because they do want, structure, and sometimes can be related to conflict. if that conflict is painful, a la Chiron, but it's going to be constructive per Saturn. Like Saturn it knows that it will be necessary for the growth and for, like especially like emotional growth, and just to like not feel like you don't know where you stand on your feelings, or like that if there's been any confusion. Look, Mars retrograde, like if I told you, oh yeah, go have that hard conversation during Mars retrograde, the average astrologer would be like, no, don't. But also sometimes the retrogrades are good for that, because when else are you supposed to do it? It's usually those overdue conversations, those overdue conflicts, those things that you just like I can't stand this anymore. Like I can't help myself but speak on it. And that's why I think Mars retrogrades are not good for petty conflicts. Like there's no need to like pick at someone. Like if you can like, it's the phrases, like pick your battles, right? If there's been this long-standing war and it's been just eating you up, and you feel like really at odds maybe with a friend or a family member or a partner or whatever, or there's something just like that you just don't feel clear on, especially with like how they're feeling, which, it's like, how are you feeling? What is this feeling? It's like, I mean, maybe there's a more constructive way to ask, like, hey, I feel like I'm distant from you. Like, is that true? Like, are you feeling this too? Therapists, I'm not one, but therapists around the globe shouting I statements, right? Like stick to yourself in this. And then also too, maybe there's something you do, because these two planets are such builders. Maybe there is something you've been wanting to build, either for yourself, with another person. It feels really with another person, just because water is so inclusive and so like about, Cancer and Pisces are really love to blend with other people. So maybe there's been something that you want to build with others, but then there's something like that's hard to say about it with the Aries Chiron. But again, like Aries Chiron is getting love from the moon. So like, I think there will be, I don't know, I can't guarantee great reception, we'll be heard and everything will be fine. But it's like at a certain point, some things just need to be said. Some things, feelings need to be clarified, and we can't just act like mind readers. Like, oh, of course, like that's what that's about, or that's that feeling. So, I'm going to just give it zoom out, and I'll get to the Sabian symbol too. How did that feel for you, Kalli?
Amazing. No notes.
Okay. That one felt like trines are fairly straightforward, not 100% straightforward, but it's like, yeah, like the hard conversation should hopefully not be too hard. It's probably going to be the hardest for the individual being the approacher. I don't know if it's like, if you ever watch the Nathan Fielder, the show where he practices the rehearsal. The rehearsal was a great show. Like everyone practiced a conflict they had to have and tried to see every option that would have happened if they said this, if they said A, if they said B. And the moral of the story is like the other person is not thinking about it as much as you are. And it's also okay to like have conflict. Like you're going to have like this, hopefully you have the structure and tools to move through that. And also a good reminder with the Jupiter Gemini is like, maybe like the advice from others isn't really needed right now. Like I think however you want to do it is probably the best way. And I don't think it needs to be like, if I were you, I would do this. Like, and if I were you, I'd do that. It's like, what would you do? Because it's Leo. It's the Leo full moon. Okay, I think that's it. So I just want to do the Sabian symbol because me and Kalli love Sabian symbols. And I looked up the Sabian symbol for 24 degrees of Leo. And we have, I'll bring my mic closer to you, Kalli, too, in case we want to talk more about it. But for 24 degrees of Leo, we have an untidy, unkempt man. Oh my God, it's me. And then these are just some lines from the James Burgess website where I've looked up the Sabian symbol, but it says, we cannot focus attention on two things at the same time. A highly motivated seeker will not attend to worldly matters with the same ambition as others, choosing to concentrate fully on what they consider more important. The inner reality of spiritual practice. How they appear to others is of small concern. And some other log lines are, we cannot We cannot expect to excel to mastery of any kind unless we bring total concentration to the matter at hand, giving attention to only what matters. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the idea just to kind of scan and interpret from this is like this dude looks like crazy, I guess, like, and looks like an unkempt, like, urchin,
Outcast.
an outcast, yeah, like a misfit, but like it's because they're like meditating, like they're like doing their own thing, like just because he visually doesn't look like a clean member of society, it doesn't mean that he's not like evolved and like not, and also like, I mean, it's very like judging a book by its cover too, in a sense, like, and it's so, I mean, the United States like hates homeless people, so like it feels very, I mean, how can you not like sort of relate it also to the appearances of what our country even is trying to do right now? Yeah, I'm just like looking through and seeing if any other like lines call to me. Did you have something, Cal?
Yeah, I love this Sabian symbol so much. I like the image of this like inner wisdom and inner wealth. And reading the introduction reminded me so much of what you were saying about Saturn and sort of the Piscean like spirituality, like having this inner compass, inner guide that like might not make sense in the outside world. And Saturn being so like the focus you were talking about with the chef, like needing to lock in and sort of plot out options that might make more sense a few months from now when things are maybe more in flow.
Yeah.
That this is like look within and don't be afraid to be different and like stand in your power, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love, thank you for relating it back. And even this line, just looking back at James Burgess's, is the antisocial attitude is a mark of the eccentric rather than the clown. And it's like, yeah, this guy just doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And like an untidy, unkempt man means he just like cares about other stuff. And even, I hope we as a society, I feel like it was unfortunately cool to like, there's this like girl on Love Is Blind who was like, I've never worn the same outfit twice. And I think that's mentally ill. Like, I think that is more mentally ill than like a dude who's like wears the same shirt every day. Like having to have this thing because if I like, and of course no one on that show is deep enough to go, why do you feel like you're not supposed to repeat an outfit? And then if we were actually having really deep philosophical conversation, it'd be like, well, because of consumerism and because of also visibility, right? Being seen, being photographed, being a person that is used to wanting to be interpreted by others. And this person doesn't care how they're interpreted by others. I just read the word matters, so it came into my voice. But giving attention only to what matters. I feel like this is another person that writes Sabian symbols, but this line says like totally concentrated upon inner spiritual attainment. A man is sitting in a state of complete neglect of bodily appearance and cleanliness. So, that goes like, okay, like don't forget to shower, like, don't forget to do some physical care. But, you have a line you're like, okay, taken to the extreme. Okay, great. Well, we always have, there's always two sides to anything in astrology, in life, and mysticism. Taken to the extreme, a complete self-confidence with the uniqueness of our characteristic approach can show itself as a complete disregard for any of society's rewards or penalties. Yeah, so I think like it's like very, very good in theory and good in like some level of practice, but also like, I mean, the word is neglect here a lot of the times, and so we don't need to go neglect mode. But maybe if you're listening to this and going, hell yeah, I would actually love to like do this and just only focus on the internal, like maybe there has been too much focus on the external in appearance and how you're perceived, which again, it's very Leo, it's extremely Leo. And so can you, back to the self-love stuff, like self-love yourself, even if you were like challenge yourself to, me and Callie talk about, we're Tauruses, we're Venus people, like use your whole closet to like, God, to even like just to not waste things, and to also then, like what things are distraction from you actually going more deeper inside yourself versus just staying on the surface. And I think Leo doesn't get categorized as a deep sign because I think it's only seen as this like vain performer, and some of those themes I talked about there. But it is the Trine to Chiron. Like, what is it why have you been felt like that need to be performing and what can you change about that, and also in terms of connected to your, the world around you and the future that you're planning. Did you say you saw the Sabian symbol earlier this year, Kalli?
Yeah, I was doing a thing, sometimes I still do it, where I look up the Sabian symbol of the day or of, the morning. And I was reading this back in, I must have been August.
Yeah. Or it could have just been a moon day.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love this one. I think it was something I needed to hear at the time too. Like, concentrated on spiritual attainment, a man sits in neglect of his appearance and cleanliness. Like, where you're putting your effort, it will manifest in some way. So if I'm more focused on my inner goals, maybe my outside appearance is not the most important thing of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't remember where I heard this.
Giving attention to what matters. Like, I don't know, discernment almost.
Yeah, I can't remember where I just heard this in the story of my life, but it's like, even like, let's say it's not an untidy person. Let's say it's like also just like dressing for like the life you're wanting to live. Like, this person is maybe they used to have it all and they like hit rich and they're like, yeah, I'm unsatisfied. I'd rather like have my one shirt and, have my Buddhist practice than, trying to keep up with the rat race. I think a lot of us are sick of the rat race right now, but also too, like, dressing and like adorning yourself for the life you want to live. Like, if you want to paint more, get clothes you can paint in, and like that you can get messy. If you want to be an astrologer, go to sleep and wake up in the clothes you're still wearing. I'm just kidding. But you can do what I don't know, like maybe start working with the planets and like dressing like I don't know, I put this orange sweater on because it was the Leo full moon, and I was like, oh, that'd be cute to wear with, it feels very lion's mane, and Leo's connected to creativity. And same, I don't know, I'm like saying both things at once. Maybe it's Mars retrograde. There's a little almost fake it till you make it for some. Like, I think if you haven't been accessing your inner world through your outer adornment, maybe give that a shot this lunation. But then also too, if you've only been focusing on outer world and outer adornment and looking like the painter but not painting, then maybe like get rid of all your like dress up and just get back into like what the soul search is for, whatever it is, whether that's spiritual attainment, whether that's an artistic practice, whether it's just like being a good person or like whatever it is your goal. Oh my God, I'm almost like, should we watch this YouTube video of this guy explaining an untidy, uncut man? Oh my God, it's 6 minutes long, so maybe not. We'll see. Oh, hang on. Oh, shit. Let's see. Oh, some good drums going here. All right, Kalli and I are back after watching a 6 minute and 54-second YouTube video from, I believe, is that James Burgess? Wow, okay, I've only been using his site for a number of years, but we just watched the Sabian video, I'll link it, about this symbol. And I mean, well, Kalli, I'll let you take it away. I have some thoughts, but I mean, it really tied to a lot. I mean, reading that, but hearing him say it, maybe it's also because like, it just, he seems like an eccentric guy, and it was all about eccentricity. I would love to hear your fave moments, maybe of his recap of the Sabian symbol and any tie into the astro aspects we just covered.
I really loved what he said about having the confidence to march to the beat of your own drum. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't tell you which exact placements that corresponds to. You can, I'm sure, help me with that. But you did say something of that nature in relation to Leo and having inner work, like time to reflect inside to know what you want to do or how you want to move forward. And I do think it takes a lot of strength to deviate from the pack or societal expectations, familial expectations, friendship expectations, and really listen to what you're being called to do. Mm-hmm. And take steps towards it.
Love it. Yeah. And so, yeah. And then just a reminder, this is the Sabian symbol for that moon degree, but it, it really ties in. I think that's always what's cool. It's like it really ties into the chart of the moment. And I thought it was like interesting for him to repeat or, hammer home like that those people judging you probably will be some of the people that are closest to you, like you said, and how being eccentric can be that pressure to then follow the pack or even push the edges of reality further. He also mentioned like a lot of famous scientists doing that. And I think it's interesting thinking now of how modern American society is really similar to like history, is making it so doctors and people who study facts seem crazy when they're not, when they're actually reporting data and the truth. And also because science and experiments and things expand our knowledge and information. And also he was just talking about like, yeah, like sometimes, you know, you can't do many things at once. And I think I talked about, I think it was related to Venus, about how like we need to lock in and prioritize maybe certain buckets of life. Maybe that is that spirituality due to Neptune. Maybe all these goals, and maybe I've been overwhelming anyone listening with what you want to do, but maybe there is just some spiritual reset that needs to come first and foremost. Or what I even thought of, even if it's not a spiritual thing, like I think about this a lot with like kids or, you know, big life goals. Like if you want to do it, you'll do it, is always my thought. Like that's how I know, like I'll know when it's time to have kids because I'll just fucking have one. Like I think it'll be the time where they come. And I think if there's been something you wanted to do, like then make that the one, like that is the target. One thing, like, you know, I know we've talked about tunnel vision as a theme in astrology a lot. Like sometimes you do have to spread the spread and do a little bit of a bunch of things. But right now it feels really like it's easy to get lost. And so how can you simplify? Maybe that is cleaning up distractions so that you can be right with the one thing that it's really the most important to you. And in this example, it is spirituality, but I think you could apply that probably to other things. But it was a pretty good video. I recommend watching that if you want a deeper insight. And I think that's it. Me and Kalli are about to go on a full moon hike with our community who, you know, maybe will show up unkempt as a protest. And just one thing, only because it's so interesting with the Jupiter unaspected too, because I was like not hearing the influence of other people was also tied to that. And I think it comes back to like everyone's gonna have like, well, when I dated, I did this, or like when I got this job, I did that, and it's like, well, literally nothing is the same anymore. So thanks for the well wishes, like thanks for the intention of what you're trying to do, but ultimately you're still gonna have to do what it is that makes the most sense for you. That's my show. Thanks for tuning in. I've never ended that way ever. Final closing thoughts from my producer, Kalli.
Thank you for having me, Stevie.
You're welcome. Thanks for visiting me. I always have the best time with my dear friend Kalli, and I love her so much. And I hope everyone has people that make them feel more like themselves in their life. And if you don't, just dress like shit and do your own thing. Because fuck it, life's short. Life's also long. See, it's all both. And I hope that this full moon is a good one. I mean, I love a full moon. I love gathering with friends on a full moon. And yeah, and also maybe this only because I just saw that Cancer Mars retrograde. We don't got to take anything personally. We can water off a duck's back. Just do your own eccentric thing and you'll be good. Thanks for supporting. I'll catch you next time. Bye.